My name is Gaby Zuckerman. I'm a sophomore and I'm currently registered as environmental science, but I want to major in biostatistics and math. So growing up, I was raised in a loosely conservative Jewish household. My father was raised Orthodox Jewish and my mother was raised conservative, but we didn't regularly go to temple each week, just for high holidays really, and I was never bat mitzvahed. My brother did have a bar mitzvah though, for whatever reason. And then coming here, I was actually, I was at a point where I felt like very secular and not very attached to my religion. So even though I was interested in the idea of going to Hillel, I didn't think that I would be Jewish enough to go, which sounds like almost silly to me now, but I think it's a very legitimate fear that, people might have. I've definitely embraced more of the cultural and ethnic parts of Judaism, not necessarily the religious, but that's one of the things that I've since discovered since coming to college is that you can embrace some parts of Judaism but not others because it is also an ethnicity and a community. I mean, I always knew what Hillel was even before I came to college. I'm actually from Daytona Beach, Florida, and even though there are parts of Florida that have a lot of Jewish people, Daytona Beach is not one of them. So just being in a place where there are lots of different Jewish people that I can meet, different kinds of people that, have similar experiences. That was a big part of it. I also did a Jewish Learning Fellowship last semester where we met every Monday night and talked about life's big questions was the name of it, using texts from the Old Testament and from the Tanakh and stuff like that, and talk about how Judaism would answer those questions.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your understanding of Jewish texts, your familiarity with them?
Okay, so if you'd asked me that at the beginning of the semester, I would have said a 2 or something. Because I wasn't bat mitzvahed and we didn't go to temple that often, I never read texts. I'd never read the Old Testament. But I wanted to not only get some gen eds this semester, but actually have a reason to read the Old Testament and see how I felt about it, because it's the text that they say this is the stuff that you believe in, but I was never showed that text. So I actually am taking Intro to Old Testament right now in the Religious Studies department. And so, actually now I've read, parts of Genesis and Exodus and Deuteronomy and all those kinds of things, the Pentateuch. And so I would say my familiarity is probably up to, I guess a 6.
And in particular, how has your experience in that class been kind of bridging that gap between something that you originally kind of held as your faith in school?
Yeah, so when I began the class, so you get the whole, Old Testament book, and it's just this massive book. And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna read this whole thing. We haven't. But I was by the end of the semester, I'm gonna, know how I feel about these texts a lot more than I do right now. Because I hadn't read them before. And the way that the class looks at these texts is from an academic, literary, historical viewpoint. We don't read them theologically. So from that respect, I don't think I would necessarily read those texts and look at them and be like, yes, this definitely happened, or yes, I definitely believe in this. But I also see how, and this is one of the themes of the classes, how they've helped, not only the ancient Israelites, but current descendants and Jewish people with forming a sense of identity.
So in terms of Hillel, how often do you participate in those activities?
Yeah, so every Friday night they offer free services and dinner for Shabbat or the Sabbath, and I don't go for the services because the prayers just personally don't really mean that much to me, but I do go for dinner every single week because food. And I know the people there, so it's a good place to go, and the dining hall is closed and everything.
So have you ever had any experiences on campus where you feel not necessarily your faith, but kind of the Jewish faith in general, was challenged, or in a good or bad way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely nothing wrong with having your beliefs and viewpoints challenged. I will say that Hillel will have a couple events, that are very mainstream, in the Pit or in Polk Place. In particular, I sat at Israel Fest last year, and students from SJP, came and were, questioning us very intensely about our viewpoints and how we feel connection to Israel. And so we had like a very engaging conversation. So not just them, but also our Israel fellow, who was Ron, last year. They asked him to, yeah.
And what's SJP?
Oh, Students for Justice in Palestine, I believe.
Okay. And so you were on campus kind of doing your own kind of public thing.
Yeah, so we had like a lot of facts like about, Israel. So like here's facts about Israel, including like, here's like how we feel about a two-state solution, and we recognize that they're doing these things and this and like, solutions to that. And like I'm not going to say it was nonpartisan. Like obviously Hillel takes a viewpoint on, the Israel-Palestine issue, but I think the majority of people that I've interacted with at Hillel believe in a two-state solution and don't agree with everything that's happening over there. So it's my impression of when that happened was that the students who came and were asking us questions didn't understand at all how we felt a connection to Israel as the homeland. And I don't know if their views have changed. Of course, I haven't really talked to them since.
Yeah, and how would you describe like their demeanor kind of coming into that space then and talking?
I mean, certainly inquisitive. I wouldn't say it was like aggressive or anything like that. I think that it was good that the whole situation fostered a conversation. I don't want to say that they were like accusatory or not understanding, but it also didn't feel like necessarily they were trying to understand our point of view the entire time with everything.
How did it feel instead?
Like, I don't want to say they were trying to force their views onto us, but I don't want to speak negatively about anyone. But it definitely felt like they were not coming from a place of understanding. They were coming from a place of trying to, further their own viewpoints, which I understand everyone here has views that they wish were represented and were reflected. And so I think that's kind of where they were coming from.
No, that totally makes sense. And have you seen any other like instances of that on campus? Or even times when you feel like people have come at it from more of a place of understanding?
I mean, yeah, I've definitely talked to people, I've definitely talked to a lot of people who, I'll be like, oh, this is happening. They'll just say flat out, I don't know enough about this issue. I'm not going to take a stance. And I'm like, I totally respect that. Because, I mean, I was in Israel for 10 days on my birthright trip about a year ago now. And, like, they told us, everything that happened, and, trying to get peace talks and all this stuff. So, like, if you haven't had that kind of experience, it's probably a lot harder for you to know, like, exactly what's going on. Especially if, different news sources can be biased in their own ways. So you might be reading something and feel like you're not necessarily getting the whole truth. So, but yeah, I've also, I think there are people who are like totally pro-Israel and, people who are very, anti-Israel. I think one of the things that's difficult about this issue is that people might not distinguish, like, I guess pro-Judaism from pro-Zionism, if that makes sense, because like not every Jew is Zionist. And
so that birthright trip to Israel and just kind of getting that different perspective, especially taking that back onto the campus community where we have such a diverse, that's kind of what this class is about. It's like, okay, the university setting is so unique. There's so many diverse viewpoints and backgrounds and upbringings. Are you glad to be on a campus with so many backgrounds?
I don't know. I think like this campus is diverse in terms of experience and stuff, but I will say in terms of like politics, I would say a lot of it definitely leans one way. So, I mean, in that sense, it's very interesting because like, this is a blue dot in a red state in what is right now, currently, a very red country in some places. But in terms of like the diversity of people, I don't know, I mean, I wouldn't say that people directly challenge my viewpoints. I've definitely engaged in productive conversation, about politics. And I only, continue to engage in conversations that feel productive. you know, if people are very, on the defensive or the offensive, I don't see that as a productive use of either of our times.
And how have you seen that play? Like, we talk a lot about kind of social media in class as well.
Yes.
What are some examples of where you've seen that maybe, or not seen that in social media?
Oh, it's all over social media right now, especially with this week. I'm sure you know about the Vanity Fair article.
Can you kind of just real quick summarize that?
Oh, yeah. So basically, someone from Vanity Fair interviewed 4 white conservative women who go to UNC. I believe they're underclassmen. And they said a lot of things that were controversial, including like support of Trump and Kavanaugh and, all those kinds of things. And basically, social media has kind of blown up, and everyone on campus has been talking about it.
What spots on social media? What platforms?
There's a meme page, like, so that, there's
and
also,
I do think that's such an interesting microcosm of like UNC culture is that meme page. So many people are on it. Like,
yeah.
Are you on that?
I've been on it for a while. I didn't think it was, like, I didn't know it was going to be such a partisan page, which, like, is fine. That definitely represents who college students are. They're very political people. But it was just like, suddenly it blew up. And it's not that I was surprised so much that, like, it was just so much all at once.
Blow up meaning people putting like memes.
Oh, yeah, like every single meme was about the Vanity Fair article.
Can you think of an example?
Yeah, so one of the girls in the article said that, liberal men are, very feminine, and so it's hard to date here, and, she wants to date more like lumberjacks, for example. And so not only on the meme page was there an event scheduled for like tomorrow, dress up as lumberjacks to confuse conservative women, but like there were memes everywhere of like, lumberjacks and stuff like that.
Do you think that changes the campus culture in any way? Or does it just represent it?
That's an interesting question. I'm not so sure that it changes it necessarily. I think people who think a certain way are going to retreat even further into their thought processes. Because if you do lean conservative, I think you're more likely to lean into that at this point because they may feel, I think, a little more than challenged, like not like physically or attacked or anything, but they might not feel comfortable currently expressing Republican viewpoints, which it is what it is.
Do you think that's productive? How do you feel about that? And this is turning into more of a politics thing.
Yeah. Well, just because it's hard to talk about Judaism nowadays without it being a political discussion. Because, I think that's part of people not distinguishing between Judaism and Zionism. But also I think a lot of Jews just have a stance on, the Israel-Palestine conflict. And so politics definitely, I think, affects, how we view our religion. Sorry, what was the...
is that a good or bad thing that maybe people who do support Trump are a little bit more, like, clammed up?
I think if it made them deeply think about their views from a moral standpoint, it would be productive, but I don't think that's what's happening as a result of this.
What do you think is happening?
It's kind of like I said, I think they're just like retreating further into their viewpoints, and as they have to do that, they're gonna say like, look, and they use the word oppressed in the article. I wouldn't necessarily say that they're oppressed. Possibly they might feel silenced. That's certainly a possibility, because I know the girls whose name and pictures they put in the article have been getting like, very hateful, messages and things like that. So.
Have you heard that like from them or just in general?
Just like through the grapevine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just kind of back to just UNC as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that UNC could be doing anything different to like enhance the student faith experience on campus? Or the secular students' experience on campus?
I think that once, UNC, administration and stuff starts getting too involved, they might be overplaying their hand. I think maybe religion and students practicing a faith should be left up to them, and organizations should probably be able to, do, what they do without being overly regulated, and not applying that to businesses or anything outside of UNC, just in terms of religious organizations on campus.
And so you think we're at a good balance now of not overstepping that?
Yeah. I mean, I know when important things happen, Chancellor Folt is there to say her piece. The Tree of Life synagogue shooting happened, and Hillel had a whole thing day of remembrance, and people talked and all that for the victims, and Chancellor Folt came and spoke at that, which I think was important. But
why was that important?
I think it's important to show that you stand behind students from all walks of life when things happen that could make them feel threatened or upset.
And do you think Chancellor Folt overall has done a good job of that? With every...
No, absolutely not.
How do you come to that conclusion?
I mean, all the stuff going on with Silent Sam, well, all the stuff that I guess went on with Silent Sam, just because like I said, it's important, for her to show up when, students don't feel safe or they don't feel threatened. And I think she did pretty much the opposite when, students were saying, hey, this statue is, from Jim Crow era, and, it makes us feel uncomfortable and stuff. And she kind of just, retreated into, this is the law and we can't do that. And then a lot of university money was spent protecting a statue that made people feel uncomfortable and unsafe on campus.
But in terms of the synagogue shooting, you feel like she did show up there?
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember if there was a university email sent out about it.
I feel like there was.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I mean, but she definitely showed up when, Hillel and Chabad, teamed up to, do something about it, so.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about this whole faith on campus thing?
I guess I've definitely noticed variability in the amount of inclusivity in different programs on campus. I would say definitely Hillel, I think, is a very inclusive space. We have interfaith Shabbat once a year, but I mean anyone can come to any Shabbat. I'm pretty sure I have noticed Muslim students at a normal Shabbat, and we tell people what contains alcohol and what contains nuts, and we always have gluten-free, and I think it's good that there are spaces for students to practice their faith.